was lured to a remote area in Marival under false pretenses, where she was assaulted in a car. Forensic evidence, including blood found in the vehicle, supported the victim's account. The accused claimed the act was consensual, but this was rejected by the judge. He will be sentenced on December 16th. A Freeport mother was found hanging at her home on Monday, 9th of December 2024. She has been identified as 57-year-old Samdaye Dukuran of Church Street, Chickland, Freeport. Dukuran was discovered hanging from a piece of cloth that was suspended from a wooden rafter in the living room area around 7:25 a.m. by her daughter, who went to check on her. The deceased was last seen alive around 10 p.m. the night before. Investigations are continuing into the incident. Regionally, President Dr. Irfan Ali has announced a 10% retroactive salary increase for public servants effective January 2024, followed by an 8% salary hike in 2025 as part of a comprehensive package aimed at improving public sector wages and benefits. He emphasized that the two-year arrangement could amount to a cumulative salary increase of up to 35% over the last 4 years. President Ali stated, "We are about to sign an agreement with the Public Service Union. This year's increase will be retroactively applied from January by 10%, and in 2025, public servants will receive an additional 8% raise." The government views these measures as critical to boosting morale, retaining talent, and strengthening the efficiency of public service. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Look, who are you? I told you, George, I'm your guardian angel.
What is it you want, Barry? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Welcome home, Mr. Bailey.
Sentimental hogwash. I wish I had $1 million. Mr. and Mrs. Martini, welcome home.
This is what I wished for.
You see, George, you really had a wonderful life.
Merry Christmas! Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
WESN.
Words can hurt. Well, at least that's one of the prevalent ideologies in 2024. Gone is the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. To some extent, it perhaps may be something more of a modern phenomenon. At a time when the capacity to actually do physical harm is significantly frowned upon and, of course, outlawed to the extreme extent, words becomes a much more important tool in order to engage in hostile actions while trying to remain in some degree of civility that is expected in a modern society. There were, I don't want to go all the way into the details, but there was one notorious political party that had a notorious arm of that party in a certain situation that utilized physical violence as part of their modus operandi. Granted, it's an extreme example because it gave us one of the more extreme nations and governments of the 20th century. But words will never harm me has now become, we need to be more sensitive with what we say. And there's a part of me that both agrees and is hesitant to agree because there's the positives and the negatives of it. By putting so much importance on words, now all of a sudden you give the speaker so much more power over you. And perhaps that, to some extent, was the, I guess you could say, the principle behind the old saying, words will never harm me. By understanding that and by practicing that, you remove some of the power from the speaker. And they could insult you all they want, but what's the point of insulting someone if it means nothing to them? And if that is the practice of society, then the insults mean very little to society and only reflects bad on the speaker. Case in point, the chairman of the Emancipation Support Committee says, we don't say slaves anymore, we say enslaved persons, because it shows more respect. And to be honest, there's a part of me that doesn't necessarily want to call the people who went through that slaves. It is more respectful to say enslaved persons, except when I think about history has shown people in the position of the actual victim may just as likely disapprove of such a semantic shift, because then it takes what was done to them and it finds a way to present it more gently. And more often than not, the victims will say, stop it. That makes it sound nicer than it was. I was a slave. And we will use that word not to insult the victims, but to ensure that the perpetrators cannot hide. Well, because when you think about it, some of that is happening in modern times too, enslaved person. We don't say vagrants, we say, or homeless, I can't remember, unhoused or something like that. The problem is that it kind of, all of these new, softer, gentler, modern terms kind of takes away some of the harsh realities of whatever the situation is, and doesn't necessarily always serve to help the victims of those situations, because language is fluid. It moves over time. And if human nature is fickle, if we start to soften blows, all of a sudden we'll say, enslaved person. It's insulting to call someone enslaved. So we need to find something even gentler. And then all of a sudden we'll have a generation that won't even know what the Atlantic slave trade is. Or at least in the Caribbean they might still teach it, but the rest of the world might all of a sudden become ignorant and become Atlantic slave trade deniers. Because how could human beings do that?
What's the evidence for that? We'll get all of those questions. I mean, we have people who thought the earth was flat. We'll get all of those questions as we take the language and we want to soften the blow, change the framework, change the context, shield younger generations from the harsh realities. And then we'll be surprised when eventually one of those generations has no idea what we're talking about. You think I'm exaggerating? Just consider the fact that there are people protesting against Israel. They have no idea what the Holocaust was. So to say that they are fully read in with regards to the social, political, and historical and cultural dynamics between Israel and all of the countries in the Middle East and the history of that whole situation, that would not be entirely true. But they believe in what they believe in. So then now, we go to the subject that caused all this brouhaha. The Chief Secretary's words, which I don't think anyone has defended publicly. Excuse me. But dare I say, I do wonder to what extent, because there have been acknowledgement that he said it in a moment of anger, in a moment of frustration. Potentially, are we being too hard on him? My instincts say no, because it comes back to what I believe one of the stakeholders said. It's not just that somebody called the Prime Minister a house slave. It's that a fellow Tobagonian, a fellow national / Tobagonian / man of African descent was to say it. It's interesting, and it's interesting how certain phrases will be seen as more severe, less severe, more acceptable, less accessible, potentially depending on who the speaker is. But what about the principle of what he said? Was it too far just on the merits of the words? There's a part of me that wants to say no, given the type of language used in politics, but ultimately, and I can't necessarily favor the Chief Secretary, and he himself has other linguistic faux pas that have yet to be answered for. I think ultimately, even though this hopefully is not his general behavior and demeanor, I don't think it necessarily reflects well. It doesn't have to be the be-all and end-all of his career and his behavior and how we should judge him as the head of an executive, but it raises the question, and it's a question that I have asked with other political leaders, other parties, other politicians, other heads of organizations, particularly public ones. Do you not understand that at the end of the day, more is expected of you because we don't want an average Joe in that position? We don't want someone that behaves like an average citizen with average failings, because then the implication is they have average judgment, they have average strength of character, average perseverance, average determination. I get it. Politicians want to say, we're human just like you, but the implication of being a leader means you have to have certain qualities where you don't have to be, as a human, better than everybody else, but certain qualities pertinent to the job that you're doing, one would hope that we would select people who technically are above average at the very least. Otherwise, what is the point of putting you in a leadership position? Because the fact of the matter is, hope has come out from very limited sources in the political arena. One of the best chances to break the two-party deadlock that we have was with the COP, when it had a strong foundation, which is now potentially completely eroded away. And now we have new third parties coming up, but the most prominent disruptor to our political equilibrium is the TPP, because they have a base, and that base has practical value in the upcoming general elections. And I have a lot of hope that it could be a leverage for the nation, a fulcrum, to find us something new and better, to help be a catalyst or support change. Because I don't expect the TPP to be the whole change in politics, but they could add to it significantly. But one of my greatest criticisms of Farley Augustine is not necessarily that he makes mistakes, but the mistakes he makes are typical for politicians of a legislative body which most of his criticisms are targeted towards. He complains about central government in Trinidad, but then to some extent he makes some of the same mistakes and he behaves in similar ways at times as those same politicians that he complains about. At the very least, I criticize them for, I need to criticize him for. But perhaps to some extent now we need to determine, because ironically we need to determine what we want our public consensus to be. Because even though words will never harm me, we've always had a high degree of expectation with the behavior and language of our elected officials. But it seems as though they never really lived up to it behind closed doors, and now more and more it's been leaking out into the public with regards to those that have more experience than Farley Augustine. And perhaps we need to be more serious about, okay, it's one thing to have a certain standard for the public, but what about our elected officials? And at a time when the standard of the public is being more and more to regard the feelings of others, to be sensitive to every little thing you say, every little implied insult you have to be careful about. How is it that our politicians are becoming less and less unbridled, or more unbridled in their speech? It's almost like if the two things are on opposite courses. As the public gets more sensitive, we go through to 2024, the politicians are getting more brazen. And to some extent, I don't know if it makes sense. Sure, Michael Small Edison talking point of WSND Content Capital. Quick story, because the good lady is waiting, but I want to just get a short word in here with today's daily review. All right, I'll get straight to the point. The minister had another correction that he published. It's in the press. It's in at least two of the daily newspapers. He's saying that there's alleged half-truths, deceptions, and outright lies. All I'll say is this, Minister, to be straight to the point. You did not help the situation when you had a press conference and then you had to correct. You didn't necessarily say it this way, but I'll say it this way. Correct yourself with another press conference. Now, I don't know if one of the daily newspapers that you've pointed out, at least in one of the articles, did overrepresent the cost of the airport project by 400 million, or one maybe did it by 100 million. But the fact of the matter is, let's not forget, you are here complaining about a misrepresentation of a financial figure. The last time you did that, you were complaining about the Auditor General. But why would we expect an engineer to fully comprehend the rules and regulations, policies and practices of how to conduct an audit? Apparently, that might be a bit too much to ask of a non-accountant sitting in the office of the Minister of Finance. Because that's, when I read that, I just got immediately shades of the Auditor General situation. A misrepresentation of the true figures. The last time you said that, I think there's a very significant public consensus that disagreed. And now, the fact of the matter is, Minister, you may be right, because there are multiple different figures being thrown all about. But that is partially because, yes, due to your actions and your words are difficult for the public to trust and accept. Not due to anybody else's. I did not need to hear from the Auditor General to question the veracity of what you were saying over that situation. I just needed to hear your own words. And in fact, it was the same thing for the Privy Council. They didn't need to hear the Auditor General's defense. They just needed to hear from your lawyer, and they already judged against you. So forgive me if I think questions of your veracity are obvious, regardless of what anybody else inputs into the equation. But more importantly, you don't just have that running situation, ongoing situation. You yourself muddied the waters of this situation. So don't come now and complain that there is no clarity when you yourself try to say, oh, well, they're misrepresenting the facts of the cabinet note that a lot of their reports are based on. It's a cabinet note that allegedly you yourself was not able to speak to in the first press conference when you were the person that apparently brought that cabinet note to cabinet. And in that backdrop, what do you expect us to believe? And more importantly, the figures based on what you said, not directly, but the implication of your two presentations are you yourself were off by 100 million or more. So how could you criticize a daily newspaper for being off by 100 million? But I guess this is just one of those things where I do think this minister, at the very least, legitimately does not understand where everybody else is coming from. And then it brings questions, is he living a different life than the rest of us? We joke that Trinidad is not a real place, but he might be even in a bigger fantasy land than us. Okay, that's a bit too hyperbolic. But his perception seems to be not like us. And we have to question why. Let's take a break. When we come back, we have the good lady herself. Stay tuned.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Well, who are you? I told you, George, I'm your guardian angel.
What is it you want, Barry? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Welcome home, Mr. Bailey.
Sentimental hogwash.
I wish I had $1 million. Mr. and Mrs. Martini, welcome home.
This is what I wished for.
You see, George, you really had a wonderful life.
Merry Christmas! Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Have yourself a merry
It's very
little
pretty, Hallie.
Christmas.
Do you want to know the rest of it?
Have yourself a merry little Christmas.
It begins with a little girl.
I bet you want to be a ballerina when you grow up, huh?
What if I'm fat? What if my head's too big? Wait till I'm in 3rd grade. Then I'll pick a career.
A little dream.
Can I use the lap?
Sure.
No, we really gotta talk.
You can't have Santa Claus for that.
And a little magic. To remind us
Oh, you're back.
I'm back.
It's a Santa Claus, not Dear Abby.
that Christmas is something to believe in.
I had to see him. This is special. Not all Mom and Dad should get back together, but ours should.
What is it? What's wrong with her?
She was feeling fine, and all of a sudden...
Is Mommy coming?
Wow, you look gorgeous.
Paramount Pictures proudly presents a movie about a family, about a wish, and about the miracles that are inside of every heart.
Is it too much to ask? Can dreams still come true?
You know, I usually specialize in stuff you can wrap.
All I Want for Christmas. Share it with your family this holiday season.
Here's your chance to win a bicycle, a ride-on, or a hoverboard. Shop at dbesttoys.com and spend $300 or more to win big.
We've got Bobby,
Hot Wheels, Gel Blasters, Ride-Ons,
Leapfrog,
Nerf, bicycles and tricycles.
Greco, and Wonder Baby.
Visit us in store at Forces Flagship, McLean, Movietown, Port of Spain, Eastgate Smart, and M6 Plaza, Endeavour. Merry Christmas, everyone!
And we're back here on Talking Points on WSND Content Capital. Karen Escher is alongside me. We had a different conversation, nothing bad, but actually a positive one, and maybe we'll talk about it at some other point, but we have limited time. That was more of a personal topic, personal observation by Karen, which I agreed with and offered an explanation for. But what we will now be talking about is something that is not personal to us, although you yourself have walked the life at one point, Karen, but it is with regards to something that might have gone under some people's radar, but to some extent, it's one of those things where when you think about it, generally speaking, it's important enough that we can't ignore it because we want to know how the transition of whatever the next government is going to look like, one way or the other, it's going to be. And this is speaking to one of those factors that could affect it. So good morning, Karen. Welcome back to Talking Point.
Thank you, Sean, and I'm so glad you missed out that introduction.
No, I was going to come back with it now.
You'll come back with it now. I think whoever will be listening to this show has heard it more times than they care to remember. So the thing about it is that I had spoken to Sean, as you know, we do speak before, about topics. And one of the topics that I had spoken to him and then I dropped it because I didn't think I had enough information, or I didn't know to the extent to which one could rely on the veracity, you know, whether there was any real meat on it. Although I did think there was, but there wasn't enough for me to go by in the papers. And that was this whole issue with the Prime Minister, the upcoming elections, and the talk, at least for the last year or so, about the Prime Minister. Is he going to go up? Is he not going to go up? Is he going to go up and then resign? You know, and that has been, and he has, and no question he has contributed to that. He has contributed to that. In fact, Freddie Ferreira, I brought my thing, Freddie Ferreira just a day or so ago, has said that, he said that, that he had quoted the Prime Minister as saying, when he was asked, he said, he told him to come clean, let the people know whether you are going back up and what is your political future. And he quoted him, I believe, and in effect, what we got out of it is that the Prime Minister still is speaking in parables and has not given the clarity that one is seeking. Now, why has that become important? And so I'm going to do an intersection of things that have happened within the last few weeks that really bring it to the fore. And I'm going to then look, the lawyer in me, and I did speak to another very well-respected lawyer just to make sure that I had gotten it right from being in the politics. Obviously, that would have affected my
perception,
interpretation and understanding, I think, of this impact. And that is Section 76(1)(a) of the Constitution, which deals with the appointment by the President of the next Prime Minister. So I'm going to start really by go backwards from it. And what has started that conversation for me to decide that I needed perhaps to speak about it today is what Section 76(1)(a) says. It says, where there is occasion for the appointment of a Prime Minister, the President shall appoint as Prime Minister, and there's A and B, but A we are focusing on. A member of the House of Representatives who is the leader of the party which commands the support of the majority of members of the House. So let's look a little bit at what caused us to reach the point that that section has become of importance. Well, a number of factors sort of built up towards that. And of course, at the time, you probably were not able to really make the connection, but I'm pretty certain there is a connection. And that comes from the political experience. I think that is where I will say that is why I feel confident about saying that part. And what really brought this whole thing to a sort of a climax, so to speak, is the recent articles in the Guardian newspapers. I think they carried the first one, where they indicated that the Prime Minister was actually giving up, so to speak, his seat of the Digicel West to Amy Brown, who is a senator. And of course, a senator does not have a constituency, and a senator can be appointed and disappointed. So they don't have that kind of security. And the Digicel West is the Prime Minister's seat. And that was what the story, and no other newspaper carried it. But I thought that the Guardian had a lot of connections, and I felt that they knew what they were talking about. But no.
One newspaper carried, I believe, Amy Brown's response.
Right.
His published response.
But initially when he said it, no newspaper carried the story.
Except.
No, except the Guardian.
Yeah.
Right? So initially, only the Guardian carried the story that, because I read it, all the other papers, that the Prime Minister was offering his seat to Amy Brown, and no other newspaper carried it. That caused the Amy Brown, Minister of CARICOM and Foreign Affairs and CARICOM, to see as pure mischief. That was the headline. And he said that no one in his constituency ever approached him about becoming the member of parliament, and he rubbished the idea. He rubbished the idea. The problem with that was that, because the headline was Amy Brown tipped to replace Dr. Rowley in Digicel. And then it said, that said shockwaves in the PNM over the future of the Prime Minister's seat. Now what was very telling is in, I think it was yesterday's paper, is having rubbished this idea, the newspaper was very smart about it. They were very clear, and if you read between the lines, you'll understand what his answer and what they said. He said that he had not been, they quoted him as having, this is from yesterday's Guardian, when the Sunday Guardian broke the story, he said from their sources, and I'm sure they are very good sources, he's quoted as saying he had, quote, not been approached by the constituency of Digicel West regarding nomination as an electoral candidate. Then the next line, all by itself, sitting all by itself, so they want to make sure you don't miss it. You don't want to make sure you don't miss it. The Sunday Guardian story, however, never said he was approached by the constituent executive. So, what one is going to take about? What I take from that is that the constituency executive does what the Prime Minister wants. And Robert Lahan found that out to his dismay when the constituency were backing him. Prime Minister made a visit in Lebre, end of story. Forget about Robert Lahan, he's the most wonderful representative for Lebre, but Prime Minister gave them a talking to, at least he went to visit them, and after that, no more talk about Robert Lahan. So the only person is actually, the seat is the Prime Minister's seat. And the only person, I think, if it's not the constituent, which doesn't really have the power either, you know, is an actual fact, it would really be the screening committee of whom the Prime Minister is the leader of the party.
Just to clarify, I think it might be a safe assumption to say most people are not going to put themselves out there if they don't have some kind of positive feedback that the executive, the screening committee...
No, not the screening committee, the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you.
Well,
I am telling you that the only way that you will ever be considered as an MP in a safe seat, I can't speak for the other administration, but I could say with
the other parties,
with confidence, that the only way that will ever happen is that the Prime Minister has given it.
Well, right, that's my point. You're not going to just put yourself out there.
Not at all.
You're not going to do that. You're going to want to get some indication that leadership says it's okay.
And he's following instructions. And remember, he's being diplomatic. He doesn't want to fall foul of the Prime Minister for coming out and saying things the Prime Minister never gave him the authority to say, well, you know, this is the Prime Minister came and approached me. So that's why he's playing smart, but, you know, saying that the constituency. No, it's not the constituency. And that is why Sunday Guardian persisted with the story.
Yes.
Persisted with the story and said clearly that we never said he was approached by the constituency. What do you read from that? Well, you have to understand he's saying is the Prime Minister approached him.
I think that's the implied meaning of tipped. That was the headline. The headline literally said tipped, meaning, you know, the boss.
Yeah, shockwave. Well, the headline was shockwaves in the PNM over future of the PM seat. But what was the...
No, the original headline. When they said that he was tipped.
Okay, but that...
You know that it wasn't like he was voted in. Tipped meaning the leadership was like, he's the guy in line that we want to put forward.
But not he is they want to put on, or the Prime Minister.
Well, the Prime Minister, yes.
Right, and what I'm trying to say, it was rubbished. And he rubbished it too, by saying the constituency never to get people to reflect. But the Guardian knows that what they're talking about because they made a point, and that is the key point. Because when I read the article, that's what struck out to me. I knew what they were saying. The Sunday Guardian story, however, never said he was approached by the constituent executive. And they noted that's all he spoke about. He never approached him as the only constituency, the Prime Minister. So that brings us to where the intersection with 76(1)(e), because you see what has been happening in the PNM administration, and one of the things that the PNM party has rightfully been proud of is its ability to contain dissension, its ability to contain where there are difficulties, unlike having it out in the public domain. But this whole thing, in my respectful opinion, I don't think Amy Brown was, this is my opinion, and it's an opinion I can have, I do not think that Amy Brown was his first choice, but Amy Brown is a good choice for the electorate because he's young, and people said they want a younger person. The Prime Minister is 75. They want someone who's educated. You saw that with the SRC, talking about salaries. You know, he is a medical doctor by profession. And there's been no scandal or baggage associated with Minister Amy Brown. So on three fronts, he would be someone who would be attractive to the electorate. But you see, before you reach that Rubicon or cross that Rubicon, you've got to cross the Rubicon of your party. And therein lies the 76(1)(e). So in my respectful opinion, I do think that he wanted Stuart Young. I mean, he's done this before. He wants you to know he didn't want Gary Griffith. He said enough to let you know that he did not want him, quite apart from whatever happened in at the president's house. But he spoke openly about it. He took a picture with Jindal, who's facing serious charges in India for bid rigging. And a picture speaks 1,000 words. And, you know, the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Manning says, he's a man that wants his own way. When he doesn't get it, he becomes a raging bull. I'm just quoting him. The raging bull doesn't have to show its ways in the same way as anger, although he's known for that. And his Stuart Young, I think, was his choice. Stuart Young was his choice on a number of levels. I think he felt that he shared commonalities with him. For whatever the reasons were, he certainly showed the commonality that he could be vulgar and so on. So, yes, he showed that, and also so the point about it is that he was his choice, but there was such an uproar, this is my view, within the PNM ranks. There are a lot of people who have that ambition to be Prime Minister. You have to understand that, and nothing is wrong with that. A lot of them who become MPs also see themselves as future Prime Ministers, because that is what you have to be to become a Prime Minister. And I think a lot of them, whether they supported each other individually, they certainly felt in a common ground that he was not the person, and they would not support it. And you had Robert Lahunt coming out and saying, talking and speaking about this is not a monarchy where you are no person, because there was enough talk, and the talk started when, from August, beginning of August, when instead of appointing, as he always did, Colin Imbert, Minister of Finance, to act for him as Prime Minister on every occasion for the last maybe 7, 8 years, I don't think anyone else acted, suddenly had Stuart Young acting for him. And even after the bacchanalia that of the statement, which I will not repeat, which has somehow, thanks for the Minister of, of Finance, who used to be the former chairman before Stuart Young became the chairman, after having made enough, saying enough that was very, very so crude, he was lucky that he had the Minister of Finance close to him to tell him, you know, the mic is on. And of course, a lot of damage had been done, but maybe he saved him from further damage. And then you had the Speaker, I mean, using language that was very, very strong, misogynistic, homophobic, bordering on criminal insinuation. I don't think she could have used any stronger language. And yet she rose from his seat because the idea was that he should go to the Privilege Committee. I suspect she thinks that he should have gone, but she was not prepared to do it. That's just my view. So she rose, she said what she had to say, very harsh words, very harsh words against Stuart Young. And I think that was the end of Stuart Young. I think that was the end of Stuart Young and his ascension to the post of Prime Minister, because too many of his qualities that one did not like in the current Prime Minister. If you ask the man in the street, you know, he is the Prime Minister, but there's many similar criticisms, one could say they had that of him. And in any event, there are people who are there 20, 30 years who might rightfully feel that they were more entitled, and there are all kinds of permutations there. But to have Robert Lahan come out and say, you don't annoy people, you know, this is a democratic republic. You don't put the crown on someone's head. It's something to vote. So clearly it was a message to the Prime Minister, and I think he was speaking on behalf of a number of persons who probably within the ranks of the PNM. So I think Amy Brown coming into the front line was by a process of deduction that he was not going to get the support of a lot of the ministers there who themselves may have had the aspirations, who themselves felt, even if they didn't have the aspiration for themselves, he certainly wasn't. One, I think Foster Cummings might be one. I think Penelope Beckles is not a bad consideration that would feel that certainly they should be considered and so on. So I think he had to drop him. That's what I think. I think he had to drop him. He was forced to drop him. So having forced to drop him, that's my view, he then went with Amy Brown, which would be very palatable to the electorate. But you see, before you reach the electorate, you've got to pass the Rubicon of the party. And therein lies the problem that the Prime Minister has, which brings me to 76(1)(e). And that is, it says, just reading it over, where the occasion for the appointment of a Prime Minister, the President shall appoint as Prime Minister a member of the House of Representatives who's leader of the party which commands the support of the majority of members of the House. So it doesn't mean the majority of members of your party who are in the House. It includes the opposition, and I don't know what's going to happen with Tobago, but it might also mean the representatives for the 2 seats in Tobago who may not support in the event that the current administration does win the elections. And therein lies a lot of the problems, because if the Prime Minister is indicating to the public that he may not go up, do you know what that means? You are powerless. You are nobody. Ask Mr. Pandey. Ask George Chambers. Ask Kamala Pasabia when she is no longer Prime Minister. Ask them what happens to them. Even ask your current Prime Minister when he and the then Prime Minister, Patrick Manning, fell out. And where was he resigned, sent to the backbenches and stripped of his ministerial portfolio? Understand the power of the Prime Minister, which the Constitution provides. When you are no longer the Prime Minister, you are powerless. You are nobody. You cannot exert the power that you now exert. So, if it is that you are either one, testing the waters to see how the electorate will respond to Amy Brown being your substitute, B, you're going to give up your seat but go on another seat as MP in a safe seat. That's another possibility. Because remember I remember Eric Williams, I think, did something like that. Huh? He said he was resigning, and when they thought he was resigning, everybody came out to the woodwork. Right. And then all of a sudden you say, I'm not resigning. Yeah. And that was, you don't underestimate politicians. Yeah, and don't underestimate persons like Dr. Raul, who is a very astute politician. There's no question about that. So let us assume he really is not going up. If he's not going up, who is he? He's nobody. He's just like Mr. Pandey, who used to be a demigod, who was chased away in his own village because guess what? He was no longer Prime Minister. And let me tell you, the maximum leadership they talk about, which the Constitution confers on our Prime Minister. If you are not in that house, you are nobody, and nobody going to listen to you. The phone not going to ring. You do not have the power to...
In fact, wouldn't you say that when the whole question about Stuart Young succeeding him came up, and we started to see cracks and things that we probably wouldn't have seen before from the PNM, we were able to see behind the curtain. Right. That could be a sign that, yes, you could already see the power slipping, and hence why he has stopped speaking about it, stopped indicating, because, and I've said this before, and this is not unique to Dr. Keith Rowley, as you pointed out, this is a reality of all political leaders.
Which he was well familiar with.
Right.
Remember when Mr. Chambers' wife said? She said she did not want a state ceremony for her husband. You don't remember that? Well, you wouldn't remember, but I remember that. Sorry.
So
she remember that because she said how they treated him after he was no longer prime minister.
Because the thing is, even Barack Obama's last year, he was essentially a lame duck president. Like, the last year of your second term, right, when you basically know that the politician is retiring, is leaving office, they lose a lot of their influence because they're not going to be around.
A lot of? Lot of is not even the word.
I mean,
in America, at least they still call you president and they still give you a security detail and they still give you respect. In this country, when it's in the phone, you have no power at all.
Yeah.
And he understands that. So the thing about it is, this is where the conundrum applies to him, because I think he wants to have his way. I don't think that when the Prime Minister Manning said that, when he does not get his way, I'm not going to say he's a raging bull, but I will just say that he's not happy about that. But he is facing a conundrum, and it started spilling out into the party. This is why he had to drop Stuart Young. That's my view. He had to drop Stuart Young because it was getting to a point that people like Baptiste Primus, and let me just say also, not only they started having headlines, is Stuart Young the chosen one? And headlines like, even after what happened in the parliament, when he used such vulgar, crude language in the parliament, that even after that he has acted every single time for the prime minister, as prime minister, going to Samoa, going to New York, and so on. So he has not fallen out of grace with the prime minister, even though he has used very vulgar language. So therefore, he still would be the prime minister's choice. But it is clear to me that he's getting enough pushback. And then on top of that, why did you decide now to cancel the internal elections and the convention, which was carded for November the 17th? Now, it is clear that the internal elections was not for the position of leader, chairman, of which Stuart Young is chairman, deputy political leader, or general secretary, which is Foster Cummins, okay? It was for the other members who would make up the screening committee. Now that brings in the question, do you want to, and you have now cancelled it, not postponed it, and of course you had to have the General Council meeting, which said he acted ultra-virus constitution, because you cannot do such a thing without getting the agreement of the General Council. And according to the reports, they wanted to do it by show of hands, which is to put pressure on you, and people said, they said no. And of the 140 people who voted, anyway, 70 of the 140 did not vote for the cancellation. 5 abstained, and Jennifer Baptiste Primus came out and said clearly the Prime Minister is speaking in a very convoluted manner, because one minute he's saying we're not going to have internal elections in the same year as a national election. It's not good. And then you use that same argument to say why you're not having it, because you don't want to have it in a year of a national election. Which one is it? So it's just, you know, it's just put, and she came out and said it. So what you are seeing is the dissatisfaction and the discontent within the PNM spilling out into the public domain. And that is something the Prime Minister needed to contain, because that is what this current administration has always had and used over the opposition, that their own is bacchanalia, and who is not in the opposition leaders' good books and so on. And now you are seeing yourself that people are actually challenging him, and they could challenge him, because if you are saying one or two things, just 75 years of age, you are saying one of two things: you're giving up your seat, which means you're not going to be a member of parliament, because you have to be a member of parliament to be a prime minister. That is what it says. You have to be in the house, right? So if you're not in the house, you are nobody. You are just nobody. Who cares what you think? Ask Pandey, ask Mr. Manning, ask George Chambers. The reality is you are nobody, and you know you're going to be nobody, right? That's the number one. The number two is, but at the same time, you are still the leader of the party, because those elections do not come up until, I think, 2027, which is after the national elections.
27 or 26?
Well, even if it's 2026, is after the national election. So normally, as the provision has been understood or traditionally interpreted, whoever is the party leader becomes the prime minister if his party wins the election. Okay? In this case, if you are not going up, let's say you're not going up, you're not in the House. And that speaks to your leadership of the party. And since the party knows you not, if that's why you're not being clear, I think, partly, if you're not going up for the election, then your leadership means nothing. Because if you as a leader are not going to be a member of parliament, then what does it matter if you're the leader of the party? Because the leader of the party is the one you're afraid of, because he's the person going to be prime minister. But if you are leader of the party, and it is not the leader of the party, it says a member of the House of Representatives who is the leader of the party which commands. So you have to have won the elections. And the way our elections are going, they're very, very close. And you don't know what Tobago is going to do. So then, how do you exercise, even if you chose Amy Brown to run for your seat, what power do you have in the House when the opposition certainly is not going to support whoever you choose? And I don't know what Tobago is going to do. How are you going to control the members of parliament who are there if your party should win? Because you are no longer a member of parliament, even if you're a leader of the party, but your leadership means nothing because you're not in the parliament, and therefore you cannot be prime minister, and therefore you cannot control how I vote. So I think part of the reason why they have put off the screening, the internal elections, was because partly to ensure that the persons who would be form the screening committee would choose persons who would toe a particular line. You never know what people will do. I can assure you of that, having had my own experience how many years ago, but you will not go into. So we are facing a conundrum, and we have a leader who's facing a conundrum, because how is he going to achieve what he wants? What does he want? He wanted Stuart Young. He had to put, in my view, he had to put Stuart Young to the side because he got too much pushback from members within that party and even cabinet members who would not accept that. And he could not afford to have what happens to the other opposition to happen to the PNM, because PNM is due for stability. Okay, so he had to put Stuart Young, in my respectful opinion, to the side, because not because of so much electorate, because the party would not have it. Then he took this Amy Brown, which is very acceptable, I think, to the electorate, but he has to have him accepted to the party. How is he going to get the party to accept it if you are no longer a member of parliament, and therefore you're no longer going to be the prime minister? And it really doesn't matter if you're the leader of the party, because even as leader of the party, it's not the leader of the party, it's the leader in the House. And if you're not in the House, it doesn't matter what you think. And that is why I believe that you're getting so much of this sort of spilling out in the public domain of the dissatisfaction within the party. And this is why I think the Prime Minister is caught between a rock and a hard place in putting his position to the thing. Because however he cuts it, if I was in the PNM and understand the PNM party, I will understand right now that Prime Minister, he may be leader of the party till 2026, but in 2025, if he doesn't go up, he cannot be Prime Minister. And whoever he wants to choose, he cannot, that person has to get the majority support of the entire House, which includes the opposition. And there are persons who might be in that House, cabinet MPs, who do not support Amy Brown. So he is between a rock and a hard place, which is why Ferdy Ferreira has called upon the Prime Minister to come and state his position. And I think my view is that he's weighing all his options, and whichever way he looks at it, in my view, as others must be looking at it within and without the party, he is in a difficult position to getting his own way. And his own way of having whatever his chosen one as the prime minister, because we do not have a monarchy.
Well, so there are a couple of things. One, I'm not too sure if he is totally given up on Stuart Young just yet as being a potential replacement.
Right.
But he definitely has to back away from that now. And
With whom?
Well, back away from publicly putting it forward.
But who is he asked to back away with? Because remember...
Just back
with whom?
With the public.
No, with whom? That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Right.
With whom? You cross, no, not and with people in the party. He has to deal with it with the party.
Yeah.
And when it is you are not going up. It doesn't matter if you are the leader. And even if you are the leader, you're already saying that if you go, you might resign at your age. Don't you understand? However you cut it, there are people inside there who want to be prime minister.
That leads me to my next question, which I think you just half answered. Because you said even if he was the leader, he's still going to retire, right? But therein lies that question. Right now, he is, I believe, the only potential candidate for Digger Martin West. So the door is not closed of him.
Who is the potential?
Dr. Heath-Rowley. The door is not technically closed on him going for that post in the next general. For Dr. Rowley. Right?
No, he testing the waters.
Right, he could still do it.
Yeah.
And then now the question comes up, if he does, right, and the leadership is up in, say, the next year or 2027, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
What, do you think he'll just, retire, give way? And then what would happen to Digger Martin West?
That is all what we're talking about, because if he goes in because he is the leader, and so traditionally the leader, if their party wins, and if he does not give a seat up to Amy Brown, but takes another seat, maybe. You don't have to discount that. He could do that, right?
Yes.
Even if he were to do that, once he gives up his post as MP, then he's out of the parliament. And once he's out of the parliament, he's not the prime minister.
Yeah,
and as long as he's not the prime minister, I think you do have to have a by-election. And once you have a by-election, it's bacchanal. However...
Now, as in nationally or internally?
Nationally, because, listen...
Because the British Parliament, I believe, they have changed, the Conservative Party have changed their political leader and prime minister during a single term of office multiple times. Without a national...
Without having a thing. But in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, and they had their own challenges with that. Trinidad and Tobago is not... the politics of Trinidad and Tobago is not the politics of... And the personalities that you're dealing with. You remember their prime minister with his shaggy hair, what's his name?
Boris Johnson?
Right. I mean, look what he resigned for having a Tea Party.
That's true.
Right? You think you see any of them coming close? You see any prime minister coming close to resigning because of a Tea Party?
I'm not going to lie. It makes me jealous, right? When,
exactly. So don't compare it.
You all have people being responsible of Tea Parties. I'd love if that is one of the bigger scandals of elected officials.
Exactly. We've had so many things with the quarry license, with the AV drilling, with the Inez Gate. I mean, come on. Nothing makes them go. Nothing makes them go.
But you think that it would have to have a by-election and that you wouldn't necessarily want to see, or I think it might be legal for the PNM to just, we'll replace the Prime Minister with whoever we want to replace him with.
But if he steps down as an MP, then there's
just for the seats,
right, and they're going to call a by-election. And once you talk about by-election, the whole. You remember our election results are very tight.
Yes.
And then with Tobago now after the THA elections, you don't know where they will go. All I'm trying to say is this: it's not a good look for the current administration, because it seems fraught with internal dissension, internal fighting, and what we do not need is uncertainty, and the uncertainty of a prime minister. Will he or won't he? Will he go in and leave? If he goes and he leaves, will the seat become vacant? If his seat becomes vacant, will they lose a majority, this majority? If they don't lose this majority, will it cause them to have to feel that we need to go back to an election? However you cut it, it's not allowing for a smooth transition into the next period. And I think the whole rationale falls squarely on the Prime Minister as the leader and his cohort because, one, by wanting to cancel the internal elections without getting the permission of the authority, approval of the General Council, and the rationale behind it. Don't think they just did it just so, you know. Don't think he just did it just so. Why as Prime Minister called him out on that? She said, why it was last time you said we should do it this year because we don't want to go to an internal elections in the same year as we do the national election. And then you come and use that same argument that you used today. It's not adding up. You've got to read the tea leaves. All I am saying to you is that right now, with the Prime Minister's vacillation or apparent vacillation, it may not be just vacillation. He's weighing the pros and cons of what are his choices. And unfortunately, there's something called Section 76(1)(e). And unfortunately, the leader of the party in the House is not the leader in the party of the party. He's the leader in the party, right. Yeah. And if you are not inside there, you don't matter. And guess what? They knew that before. So all of those who have aspirations, maybe more, I am just looking at it because Section 76(1)(e) was considered in some detail in the newspapers, on the Sunday newspapers. And I had been looking at it previously. Remember, we had discussed it. I had discussed it with Sean. And I said, no, let me let it go because nobody has followed up on it. So let me let it go.
Where's the interest? Where's the importance?
Well, I wouldn't say I think there was interest, but I didn't have enough. You know, you have to be careful about things like that.
But also the information.
Right. That was what, for me, the reason that stopped me from pursuing it is that I didn't have enough information to make a fair comment on it, because you can't make a fair comment if you have enough information. And there's been enough information. And then with Dr. Amy Brown saying the constituency. I mean, what, you're playing games already?
Also, I believe his initial response to the media, verbally, I think it was verbally, maybe over a phone call, was that he'll get back to them.
You have to get back to them.
No, but my point is, it was very diplomatic, it was very neutral, there was no... No. Right?
I'll get back to you. Prime Minister, what should I say?
Exactly.
Listen,
and then he comes with a very strong response after the fact. And I'm like,
look, tell them that the constituency never there, and he would not be telling a lie. But the Guardian picked him up on that because the Guardian knew where he got it from. Yeah. And they knew where they got the information from, which is why they put that one line and say, we never said that the constituency elected you. So therein, you get a taste of Mr. Brown.
I'll just like to point out two things before the fact. One,
not that he's not a good choice,
yes,
by the way.
I mean, age, reputation, public perception, etc. Current
yes,
public perception.
And there's been no baggage attached to it.
Right. The thing is, we commented about the UNC when they had their internal issues, and it still seems to be unresolved. But they have successfully clamped down on information being leaked out. Meanwhile, we have a cabinet note being leaked, of all things, in recent memory. But
what was cabinet note you talking about?
Over the airport situation.
But you know something? That's to tell you the truth. To tell you the truth, what I said on another show, before we talk about that cabinet note and the misstatement about the overrun, what you building an airport for 3 million people when our population is 1.4 million? And not only that, I went to the CSO. For tourist arrivals. Yes. For Tobago alone. It's about 2,000 people a year on average. Now, when you add up visitors in total for Trinidad and Tobago, on average is about 350,000. Many of them are diaspora visitors and carnival visitors. But when I looked at Tobago alone, you build an airport for 3 million people, nearly 3 times the population of this country, when on average, 1.4 plus 1.4 is okay, 2 times, 2.5 times, right? And on top of that, okay, all right.
I talk it out
all right, on top of that, but that's not even the point.
Yes, exactly.
The point is, how many people going to Tobago? It just makes me think, well, why are you building an airport like that?
But more importantly,
why?
The country, a small country of ours, has an international airport already. So the So the
Why
complete
the 3
need.
million? Why the 3 million?
Anyway, listen.
So before you
Listen,
know,
that's a whole other kettle of fish.
No,
I want to make this
that's
last
why,
point on the previous topic, though.
No, because I think that's what they use as deflection. They deflect you to talk about the overrun. But the question you're supposed to ask is, why an airport for 3 million?
To be honest, Karen, a lot of stakeholders are not asking that question.
Of course they're not.
And
they won't.
And I wonder why.
Because they probably know the answer.
But here's the thing. Back to the internal situation with the PNM.
Okay,
And I had this, if I didn't state it, I'll state it here. I had a similar concern with the opposition. You're going into an election. The Americans do primaries before the election. They pick their candidate before the election. So you don't have these types of issues. And I think Robert LaHunt, I don't know if he was directly stating this because he brought up the fact of the undemocratic process, but this is the consequence of it. If it was completely left up to an internal election to pick the next political leader, once Dr. Rowley says he's going to retire, we have an election coming up, we have to pick a successor before, because he's not going to go through that entire term.
But that successor is not the prime minister. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
So what I'm saying is, if it was left to a complete democratic process, they could have avoided all of this bacchanal,
and can
one
I just
way or
say
the
to
other.
you, can I just say to you, you know, the bacchanal in the opposition side is par for the course. The reason why we're talking so much about this, because, it's in the paper it's in the paper so much, and Amy Brown thing, this whole thing, they brought it up to our attention.
Yes.
But it is unusual for the discipline, tolerance, and production, right? That is the watchwords, and the PNM is known for this discipline. So when you see what's going on in this current administration, within the ranks of the party, it is a surprise as compared to what appears to be par for the course for the opposition.
Except, and I'm of the opinion, and my opinion is a very limited value in this, because you lived it, and I was barely following politics when it happened.
Okay, you want to tell them how old I am, right?
No, this is about the transition between Mr. Manning to Dr. Rowley. They are parallels, and that's all I'll say. They are parallels of things, and some of it did come out in the public sphere back then. So I'm not entirely sure that this is something that
I can say this, and I can say this. I can say this. I lost my seat because they made it very clear they did not support Mr. Manning. They told me that they supported Rowley. Okay? And the point about it is, I could say that when he was opposition leader, he did not have the support of many, many of the people who are now in his cabinet and who are enjoying very high prestigious positions, who were going to send a letter to the president to have him removed as the thing because they did not support it. That definitely was in the cards. It had reached a long way, but then it died down. And we know that is so. I know that it is so because I know some of the people that were involved in it. You might be surprised who they are. So if that could happen then to him, believe you me, it could be happening to him now.
Okay. We're over time, so we won't take a break. We'll go straight and open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. Yes, again, I have no problem if you are a supporter of whichever party and you want to disagree with our comments on the party that you support. Just as long as it's respectful, and ironically, let me just throw in this, not that I have any reason that prompted me to do this, but also remember to be respectful of the other side, whichever the other side is. You can criticize them all you want, just with respectful language, right? Don't do like what some of our politicians in recent days have done, and I'll leave that one there. We have a ring on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Karen.
Morning.
Right. I must say that Ms. Sherrill's conversation this morning was very enlightening, and she was spot on. And I was with her 100% until her last comment, which is a supposition. She has whatever information she has, and it kind of threw everything that you were saying that we were taking it as face value. But that being said, your conversation was spot on.
Thank you.
My thought process with respect to Dr. Rowley is that I believe depends on what side of the bed he gets up on, then you get a different personality, which is what is transpiring with him right now. So he cannot, probably his old age, probably it's just the character of the person, but he cannot rightfully make a decision for the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago because of his level of arrogance, depends, or his level of humility. It depends on what side of the bed he gets up on. I will listen okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have Faisal on the line, and then we'll respond to the caller if we have a chance. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Clearly, Karen, there is some infighting within the PNM because to have a cabinet note leak, that is a deliberate sign of dissatisfaction within the organization. The other thing I want to touch on is the Tobago House of Assembly bill that they attempted to pass recently. It is my understanding that, hearing from Dennis Rambali this morning on TV6, that the oral submissions to the bill from Tobagoans and otherwise, online there was 159 participants. And that's the online, and the oral was 119, I think it was. So clearly, enough consultation, in my opinion, were not held. And I could hear that from the people of Tobago now voicing their opinion. The other thing is the bill was presented to the opposition and people who were concerned just the night before for them to study it. Now tell me, that is trying to push something down the people's throat, and there is an election in the air, so you would expect that kind of behavior from Rowley and company. I'll just stop here. Thank you very much.
I don't know if you want to...
Oh, I think both your callers have been very clear and made their points, and I don't think I want to disagree with anything.
I'll just say this. I actually don't necessarily agree with if Arima with your view on Dr. Heath Rowley having a sort of a fickle personality. I think, ironically, he is more or less consistent in his good and his bad.
No, he's consistent in his inconsistency, but I don't think it is... We get him on the wrong side of the bed. He's a smart man, he's an astute man, but he's caught in a conundrum. He's caught in a situation where there's no way to exactly get what he wants out of it. And that's what it is.
Whatever objectively you have issues with him on, and it's not just subjective bias, it is what it is.
Right.
It's not like that's going to change. And I think to some extent he's, at least compared to other politicians, more of a stabilizing force than others. That doesn't necessarily mean that he is a great stabilizing force, just that he's more stable. That's why, from the very beginning, years ago, I was already, when he first hinted at it after the 2020 election, I was basically saying, oh boy, when he goes, who's going to replace him? And I was dreading the comments that was going to happen because of it, and look at where we more or less reached. I'll respond to the airport situation after we have Elscore on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning.
Yes, morning, Sean. Morning, Ms. Karen. How are you?
Fine.
Yes, I will never dull day in politics in this country. But I want to refer really, to the salary review commission increase. Across the board, of course, for 200 plus people, not including the public servants on that part. But, in Guyana, something is happening. So I just wanted, I think I'm watching today's Guardian online. The president of Guyana has agreed to increase public servants' salary 10% retroactive from January 2024, not including government officials or parliamentarians. But here's the next one, which I find quite interesting. He's increasing the monthly salary of public servants in Guyana based also on their qualifications. So now we're seeing now I don't know how many public servants there are in Guyana, but this is quite interesting. Taking one Guyanese dollar equal to 0.004 US cents, a man or a woman with ACCA qualification is going to get 60 US additionally a month. A man, woman with masters is going to get 88 US a month. A man with a PhD or woman, 128 US a month. Now, I don't know how long he's going to go with this, but of course, based on the fact that we know Guyana is now enjoying a windfall of oil and gas money. and we are not, in terms of our gas production, is to increase it. It goes to saying, Mr. Karen, that one man's joy is our next man's sad. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and I mean, it's only rather I didn't read the article, but I think in many countries where a country experiences a great wealth, it is the people's wealth. And a lot of the Saudi Arabia, Libya, maybe you may not like me giving those examples because they're not exactly the most popular, but the fact of the matter, they do take, and Norway also, so that might be more acceptable, they do every year share the additional wealth with the people of the country. Whether that is enough, but it is a consequence
dividends
of
from their
fund. Yes, from the
Yeah.
HSF fund, because they invest all over the world. And you know what I mean? I mean, Ghana's had a very tough time. I have taught Guyanese students over the years. I've been to Ghana, and they have had a very, very tough time because of the state of the economy. So if the economy is doing well, it's only right that the people should enjoy it. To what extent, I can't comment at this stage because I did not read the article, but from a broad-based position, it is not unusual for a government to do what this Prime Minister has done, particularly since their population is less than 1 million.
I think restraint initially is a good thing. I believe that's what Norway practiced. So again, they're not going into the capital side of their heritage fund.
Right.
They're going from the dividends as it continues to keep growing from the investments. So, and that's being responsible and keeping the asset long term.
Right. So we have, but we on a general basis, that is not a bad thing. We need to know more. I certainly need to know more about it.
We have David on the line. Good morning, caller on here.
Morning, Sean. Morning, Karen. Let me ignore all the political talk this morning.
That's fine.
Because it irks me. I want to let you know, Sean, and the listening public, the viewing public, that Karen Teixeira, former member of finance, has been very good to W. Mira constituency. She was an excellent MP, and she was good to me also. I want to take 1 minute to wish MICIT, the leading Tibet institution in the Caribbean, a happy 50th anniversary today under the leadership of Professor Carl Membe.
Yeah.
So,
MICIT will be... It's his uncle.
Yes.
I know, sorry, but I know what you meant, Professor Imbud. But
yeah, you're correct, not Carl.
Yeah, not Carl, but it is his uncle, his father's brother.
So, a happy anniversary to MICIT today, and I'm looking forward to the 50th, the golden anniversary celebrations. You'll continue the wonderful program.
Thank you, caller.
Try to leave the politics out today. Let Karen talk about the ISP, Sean. So if Karen talk about the ISP, that would be really good.
But
talk about the what?
Thank you, caller. I mean,
talk about the what?
I think it might be the MICIC. I'm not too sure.
No, but I will always embrace the education and so on. And I don't know if you notice, there are a lot of topics that I stay away from because sometimes I think the criticism is too harsh, and sometimes I don't want to be seen to be criticizing for criticizing's sake, you know. And so there's a lot that until I am better informed, I try not to. I was Minister of Finance. I wasn't Minister of a lot of other ministries. But thank you for your comments, and I enjoyed being your MP. And I will just say this, and please forgive me if no, I won't say it, but I will say that your view of me as a MP was shared by many of your constituents, and it was a pleasure, an honor, and a privilege for me to serve W. Mira.
All right, we do have Faizabad back. I don't know, I believe it's the same caller. Welcome back, caller.
Hello, good morning again, John. Karen, this is for you. I don't know if you can do me a favor, please, because I've seen a document circulating that during the UNC tenureship from 2010 to 2015, they would have borrowed $18.5 billion US. And the present government has so far borrowed $91 billion US over the last 9 years. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know how much they borrowed. I mean, governments will borrow because if you want to do infrastructure, it's what you're borrowing for. I think that has a lot to do with it. So if you are borrowing for infrastructural work, building hospitals, building roads, and don't underestimate the power of highways, because highways, I remember when I was in government, Prime Minister Manning, explained, the need for this network. Was that a way to connect all these small villages that produce the agriculture, connect all small villages and small townships in order to create opportunities for them. So I don't know if I could comment on that. If they only borrowed 18.5, I think at that time the oil and gas prices were much higher. If this government borrowed 91.5 billion, well, it's more than just that the prices are low. I think it's a lot of, you say not to stay away from the politics, but if I was the Minister of Finance, it's clear to me that they are being irresponsible, but that's for another conversation.
I mean, there was also COVID, to be fair, but yes, we have criticized.
They got a lot of help. They got a lot of help. Don't
even with that framework, we do find there's room to criticize.
And by the way, they started the borrowing in 2016 when there was no COVID,
That's
okay?
True. That's true.
And they continued in 2023 when there was no COVID, okay?
That's true too.
There we go. From the HSF taking out money out today, okay?
Well,
and they have reduced your foreign exchange, that shortage they're talking about. I mean, you're making me now say, these are facts, I'm not making it up.
That's true.
Right? From 10 point something billion down to 5 point something billion, which the central bank had to put 500 million in June or July to keep the managed float. And what is it? It's debt. What it is, where is the debt? Floating international bonds. That's why they're afraid of Standard & Poor's. Standard & Poor's say you cannot continue floating debt, having deficits. Right? And they're saying if they took away, Dr. Arjun has been on record of saying, if you took away the debt from those international bonds you floated for recurrent expenditure, not to build up the economy or for new revenue streams, if you were to take it away, you end up with maybe zero in the foreign exchange. So even if one takes into account COVID, for which they got a lot of assistance, and they know that, even if you take away COVID, even if you take away the decline in oil prices coming out of 2014, towards the end of 2014, even if you take all of that into account, this government has failed to provide new revenue streams or to, anyway, this is not the time for me to give you a whole lecture on it.
I'll just say this, deficit spending for governments is a thing, but we probably do not have the growth to justify or to facilitate, particularly with our balance of trade issues that complicate it further.
In 2008, we had a surplus, by the way, and Mr. Manning was in office, but I was in office then. I'm just saying I was in
we do have a caller waiting, I think. We do have a caller. Good morning, caller. You're on there. Last caller for the morning. Morning. Caller,
can't hear the person.
It's very muffled, but I don't think it's our volume levels, so we can't hear you. I don't know what it is.
Try once more.
Oh, wait, I heard you just now. Caller, you there?
Morning to you and morning to Mr. Shira.
Morning.
I know that the matter which you have dealt with, particularly this morning, in a greater manner, is the question of the political leadership of PNM and the politics of the PNM. And to me, from an academic standpoint, it certainly makes a lot of sense. My concern about is, however, is Mrs. Shira still involved in active politics. I understand some time ago there was an interview said that she was faded with hope. Now the implications of PNM leadership is going to be more pervasive in terms of the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. I know that it will be unethical maybe for you to house either Mr. Shira or to host either Mr. Shira or any other member of any political persuasion. But I am wondering whether, while we are concerned, and certainly both of you have made very public, very clear about your concern for the political future of Trinidad, whether PNM or under any other administration. My concern, however, is this. Why is it, Mr. like one or two others who are boasting about leadership and succession and whatnot, are not spending more attention with regard to their own political party in terms of the possible replacement, in terms of why we may say a lot of things happen.
But is the public really aware, in the same manner that we are aware today, of the political situation in the PN? So is it possible that we can have a greater shift? A mixture can certainly be done as far as a host of a program of unit days. But can we have a shift in terms of political succession of other political organizations? Okay. And if we convince that hope provides reality, then could we be a bit more vocal in seeking to involve the wider public? Thank you very much.
Okay, so I can answer that. One of the things I took a position, I've been on this program even before Sean, right?
Yes, technically, yes.
Yeah, technically. Yes. I mean, technically,
well, it depends on if you...
I've been sitting here.
If you look at it as the same show,
okay, right.
It halfway is, halfway isn't.
Okay, but the point about it is that I have always made a decision, even when I was teaching and I was actively involved as a supporter of the PNM, never to allow that to come into my classroom. And when I come on the show, unless I have, and in fact, we've had that discussion. Myself
one
and
time,
Sean,
I think you...
Only once I spoke about hope, and that's because we decided, well, Karen, I mean, if other parties can talk about their party, you can talk about it. But if you notice, my role here is the role of any other, if you had an economist on the show, if you had a member of parliament on the show from either side of the equation, I think that, you would want to hear what they had to say. So I try as much as possible to be responsible in my commentary. I do not reference hope. You did today. I do not reference hope. I keep it out of the discussion. I've come here to talk about our country, and right now our country is being run by a particular administration which I believe has let us down. And if it were any other party that was in power, I would like to think that I would have that similar approach, so that it's not about I've kept away from it, and I think John and I have even spoken about that. And he says, you never talk about that. I said, well,
she is more strict about it than I am.
Right,
but I appreciate her point.
Yeah, I have told him that.
I agree with it, but she's more strict about it.
I am very strict about it, and also too, I do a show on a radio station, and I have had people on the different political divides, and I say to them, up to very recently, I say, listen, when I have you on the show, just remember, I'm not giving you a political platform. I'm not there to hear this one and that one. I'm not in that bacchanalia. If you come in to talk about something, let us talk about things that are good for the country. So that I hope that I have done that, and I continue to do that. And when I'm invited to speak specifically on the party, I will do so. But as long as I'm here as a commentator, I have to talk about the party that is in power and what are their policies and how they are running our country for good or bad.
Yeah. To add to that, the reason why Karen will stick to mainly the PNM, who is the party in power, is because she speaks mostly to policy, right? I might be the one that wants to talk about how they sound and all of that jazz and include the opposition. But Karen wants to be more on the technical matters, on the policy, on the hard details, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, you see in other jurisdictions, they'll get people from other political parties or in politics, whether they're third parties, independents, or whatever, to comment on what's going on with the government, the opposition party, the members of the government to defend their position, whatever. I think, ironically, because I couldn't necessarily hear you call her fully, but ironically, one of the reasons why I'm confident to say that Karen is being objective about it is then she's not following up her criticisms with saying, and this is what hope will promise to improve the situation if you vote us in. She doesn't do that. She does not campaign for a party and use her criticisms to piggyback us as a campaign platform for her organization. And for the most part, then if you want to say, yes, there's bound to be some sort of subconscious bias there, fine, that's okay. But she's upfront with the fact that, yes, she is a former minister. Yes, she was in the party. Yes, she's not denying these things. And I think in the modern media landscape, the real issue is when people want to deny and hide the conflict of interest. But and to some extent, we as consumers of media, even those in the media are consumers of media. We need to understand the context of what is being offered, because everybody is going to have some amount of biases, no matter how hard you try to be objective, right? And it's fine that's why when callers want to call me out about certain things, I'm not saying they should stop. Continue to do it, because it's a check on me. Even if I disagree with them, it still forces me to reconsider. So that's the thing. That's why Karen doesn't use her criticisms of the PNM to advance an agenda, to promote herself as a, and this is what I would, well, she has said what she did. She is not saying this is what I will do if you vote me in next time. And with that said,
I think you did a good enough
right.
defense of me.
And then I'll just say, with regards to the airport situation and consultations, the current Deputy Chief Secretary said on the show that there have been enough consultations. So to some extent, I don't know if the TPP would agree with you, caller from Faizabad, that there needs to be more. That's not to say that you're wrong. There may have been extensive consultations, and it may prove to be that they were mostly ineffective. I'm just pointing out to say that while you have a stance, I think the political opinions of the parties involved is a lot muddier than we think. And at the end of the day, it boils down to, it's expressed simply by the fact that the Chief Secretary complained that the PNM didn't pass the legislation, except that was the side that voted for the autonomy bill. So at the very least, I could understand his frustrations, but he should have done a better job to explain why it was the people that voted for the bill he wanted voted in for, why it was their fault it wasn't passed. Better. He kind of started, but it wasn't enough, I think. With that said, thanks to all the callers. Thanks for the conversations. And of course, thank you, Karen, for joining me.
I'll be happy to be here.
Folks, make today a good day, as Mr. Shah would always say. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And when walking through your day-to-day life, at least today, try to remember. It's nice to be nice. And we'll see you. Stay safe tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN